of Battlehosts. Be a better gamer, build a better community.
Welcome to the Battlehosts, a podcast and website dedicated to helping you become a better 40K gamer and to build a better community of players. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight is Matt.
Hello, everyone.
This podcast is a series of podcasts on the new edition of 40K. With the release of the new edition, we're doing these special mini episodes, each one covering a different aspect of the new edition. So in this one, we're going to talk about the new match play missions in Warhammer 40K. These were clearly designed to be a universal set of missions. You can see that I think their intent was, they looked across the landscape of all the match play different events, and lots of different events have different missions. And the two main ones were, I think, were probably Nova and ITC. And so obviously they enlisted the help. And in fact, one of them, they hired Mike Brandt from Nova. And I don't know how much, who knows how much input they had into him, but I think these missions are meant to be, these are the source of truth for match play missions for Warhammer 40K.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a mystery how much influence they had on these missions. All you have to do is look at the secondaries that we're going to mention here in a ITC or Nova. Like,
Yep.
Those sound familiar.
Yeah, I mean, you might have some tournaments that do their own unique missions, I think, but with Age of Sigmar, they pretty much you're running the things out of the General's Handbook. They don't have ITC Age of Sigmar missions as far as I know, so I think this is just they're trying to come up with a balanced set of tournament-worthy missions.
I think that's what they do in Sigmar is they run kind of missions out of the book. Sigmar. Yeah. So they're kind of shifting that way.
Yeah. And so we should say that what we're going to talk about today is the stuff that's actually in the book itself. When the book launches, there's going to be a chapter approved book that is kind of setting up for like how to basically their tournament rules, the tournament pack. But from what we've seen, there's some differences, but the structure is basically the same. So check out all our mini episodes so you know all the changes with this edition. As this is dropping, it is now Saturday, and so hopefully all of you got your Indominus box sets, and you are opening them as we speak right now. It's going to be like a Christmas on a Saturday, random Saturday in the summer. All right. So one thing this book doesn't have is Maelstrom missions. So the Maelstrom missions have been removed from this book.
They're gone. They're history.
Yeah.
There's no mention of them. We're going to have to buy all new Maelstrom cards.
Yeah, because in every edition, something they want to go ahead and basically make obsolete. So last edition was templates. And I had a Hailstrom template, which was massive. It was bigger than my laptop. That's no longer any good. It eventually broke anyway. Those things were not really meant for normal use. But yeah, now all of your Maelstrom decks, all the cards you had before, they're obsolete now.
Yeah, that's $15 we're never going to see.
Yep, pretty much. In Maelstrom missions they probably, as much as they tried to make them work, they really, most of us didn't think they were really good for matched play. They're fun for more casual gaming, and I think that's what we really used them locally. Like we had events where we had Maelstrom cards, and when we did that, basically was telling people, look, don't take this too seriously, just come and have some fun. So, and they did okay with that.
Yeah, they were fun to play with in a casual environment. I know I came up playing it with my friends playing Garage Hammer, and it was fun at times. Other times it was kind of meh, but there was a lot of highs and lows in it. If you played match play in Europe, they still played a lot of Maelstrom cards. I mean, it was modified Maelstrom. Mm-hmm. You kind of go into your deck and take out some of the more ridiculous cards that didn't apply to your army, which helped a lot, but still it was still Maelstrom cards.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, as we said, I think the intent here is everyone play the same match play missions, which I applaud. There's going to be some people that do different stuff. I think they're still selling an open war deck if you want to play that too. But I think. The cool thing is that and this is match play, not tournament play, there's a difference, right? So the chapter-proof pack that's going to come out is, here's how here's tournament play. And there are some adjustments here to the missions, the mission stuff we're going to talk about, but they're not that different. There's still the structure's still the same. But the cool thing is whether you're playing at LVO or you're playing at Nova or you're playing in your garage with some friends to play a match play mission, you're playing the same mission format, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
So, all right. So the first thing is the new edition has different missions, but it also has a different minimum size tables, which everyone is hopefully aware by now. To get to the correct table size, And at first we saw these minimum tables, and we're like, okay, yeah, people, whatever, they're not going to do anything about it. So Strike Force, which is the 2,000 points, which is where you see a lot of tournaments running, it's basically 44 inches by 60 inches, which is 3 foot by 8 inches, 3 foot 8 inches by 5 feet. So that's the new table size. And at first I thought, okay, well, most people are still going to stick to 4x6s, right? But then you saw some tournament organizers, including, Reese from Frontline, saying, no, we're going to this new size. And that kind of shifted everything.
Yeah, and it makes sense because it's a smaller board size, which means that it's smaller tables, which means that you can fit more people into an event space, which means that there's room on, current tables for things like sideboards and places to put your army, because that is one of the most annoying things when playing this game right now is there is no place to put your army. Like I have to put mine like under the table a lot of times, and it's prone to kicking. And it's like I said, it makes sense from a marketing standpoint. GW, has all but said like, hey, this is 4 kill team boards put together, so to make it more accessible for the newer player to get into it, you just have to buy 4 of these kill team boards, and boom, you have a Strike Force size table. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense from a larger macro perspective.
Yeah, and why those board sizes for Kill Team are the way they are. I've heard the rumors is because that's the packaging, the shelf packaging that sits on a shelf. I have no idea.
I've also heard that's the size that can fit into the FedEx box.
Oh, well, maybe that's it too.
Yeah. Whatever the reason. I mean,
and think about it, really, 4x6, we've been playing that for so long. There's no rhyme or reason why we're playing on a 4x6 table. We're playing on a 4x6 table. I mean, that was just the standard. I mean, it wasn't like they went and they just said, 4x6.
Yeah, and there are no natural 4x6 tables out there.
No.
I had to build my 4x6 table.
Yep.
Out of particle board and 2x4s. And it's a pain in the rear. The dimension that they have now is more akin to what the average dinner table is.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, hey, you don't have to buy 4 kill team boards to push them together to make your own table at home. Your kitchen table may well be big enough to facilitate this size of game, because 4x6, there's not a lot of living room or there's not a lot of dining room tables that are that size.
No, it was always weird when I first got into the game. When you first get in the game, you go to your kitchen table to play it, and you measure it out, and you're like, oh, I'm not. There's nothing is 4 feet wide is even truthfully 3 foot 8 inches is pushing it. That's a pretty wide kitchen table. That I went ahead and measured my kitchen table that I have, and it's like 3 foot 7.5 inches. It's real close. It's close enough. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But 4x6 is there's no natural table that size, and so it was always a question of building it. So I hope it's more accessible. I think that's the point, and if that's the way it works out, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I mean the problem came up with all these table mats that have been made over the past 2+ years, and like, oh no,
yep.
Cut my table back. Like, no, you're not.
Yeah, just put painter's tape down. Or something, or snap a chalk line, or there's a couple different solutions, but
yeah, there's solutions for it. And a smaller board just means that games are going to take less time, because how often when you're playing are there little remote corners of the board that a scout squad sits in and moves, and it's just, what is this part of the board even doing now?
Yeah, the most annoying thing about it, though, is that if you look at the maps in the book, the maps are all measuring from the center. So we're used to measuring up from the edges and having, this standard thing. I'm going to have to write in the book, like, what is the actual measurements of everything? Because, essentially you find the center point and then everything kind of spans from there. It's annoying to do that. And you're, some of the way the objectives are placed, you're going over and then down, and then it's this weird algebra thing. Okay, how much far up is it? So we're going to have to figure those out, just because right now we're so used to measuring 12 inches up. And so this is different now. It's very different. So,
just so funny when it was when GW previewed the first match play mission, and they previewed the first objective placement, and you could tell that a bunch of the world was in quarantine because almost immediately, as soon as people saw that thing, they got out their protractors and their micrometers at home, and I'm sure they mapped it out on like their living room floor and got out their crooked sticks that the generals in the movies like move like little figures around on, like, oh my gosh, this board is smaller than 4.6. The world is over.
Yep. Or they just know how to do algebra or trigonometry more than I can, because I'm just like, I don't know. But yeah, you're right. They figured it out really quick. And it, I think it's the biggest thing is about gameplay, and having played with these new sizes, you're in each other's faces quick. And I'm actually I'm okay with that. You're not, you have maybe a turn to dance around and hide, but as we're going to hear, these missions go to 5 turns. There's no roll for 6 or 7. They go to 5 turns. So you only have 5 turns to do what you need to do.
Yeah, you only have 5 turns to do what you need to do, and the scoring opportunities are so limited because you can't even score on some of those rounds.
Yep.
Play. So you really have 4 turns to do what you need to do, and so you have to get where you need to go, like, which is usually on objectives in the middle of the board. Type thing. So
for sure.
And it's going to be easier to get there for all armies when the board is smaller.
Yeah, and we've talked about assault. There's reasons why. There's things in the rules that haven't benefited assault armies, but battlefield size has definitely benefited assault armies for sure. All right, so the thing about match play is you must have a Battleforged detachment and have at least one keyword in common. So that's not unusual. That's pretty standard.
Sorry. The keyword though cannot be Chaos, Imperium, or sorry, Yanari.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah, you don't get to share that keyword, because that would mean that detachments can be mixed in, like Harlequins and Dark Eldar and Craftworld.
Yeah.
Games Workshop does not want that, even though that's very, very fluffy. That's basically how Yanari roll.
Yeah, I think that whenever they finally come back around to doing something again with Yanari, they've been in the penalty box plenty. I mean, and maybe for some people they haven't suffered enough, but it's it's unplayable right now. To me, I shouldn't say unplayable. It's really weak right now.
It's bad. I mean, Yanari are really, really bad. They went from top tier to below bottom tier, but hey, we can hold. We'll just assume that a really awesome, flavorful Yanari book is, just on the horizon.
We will see. Now, the sequence of events. Once you select the mission size in the mission, which in case for most of the time you're going to play a 2,000 point, but the nice thing about it is if you want to play a 1,000 point, which is an incursion game, it's 3x8 by 2x6, so it's a much smaller game board size. And incursion, it's really intriguing to me because 1,000 points, and of course they've adjusted all the points. All the points have gone up by an average of 15 to 20% across the board. 1,000 point games. If you run like a match play tournament, you could probably get 5 games done in a day.
They're thinking you can get like 6 games done in a day. You can get almost a full round, a full event done in one day.
That's tasty. That's actually could be really good.
And they think LVO is going to be doing an incursion level Warhammer event because you can do exactly that. It'd be like a nice little fun Sunday event where you can get like a full 6 rounds in to have one undefeated player at the end of the day.
I'd be down with that. Definitely. Yeah, because right now the RTT on Sunday is kind of like the first 8 people and grab a table, which is okay, but I'd rather have an actual full-fledged event. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if LVO is even going to happen. I mean, right now, we'll see.
Yeah, Nevada's literally the wild, wild west.
Yes.
Like literally.
Yes, it is. Yes, for sure. But once you get to mission size and you select the mission, then you place the objective markers. So you put the objective markers, and the order is very specific. The objective markers go on the table when there's nothing there. You just have the bare table, the objectives go down. Then you set up the battlefield. You can't actually put terrain features on objectives. This is actually really big. That means objectives are essentially in the open off, like for every mission, they're in the open. So there's not an objective in a ruin that you're hiding in. They're just out in the open. And there's always, in many of these missions we'll talk about, there's usually an objective in your home. There's always at least one in your deployment zone. I think one of them has two, but there's always objectives out in the middle, like in the no man's land. In this case, if you put the terrain around it, they're way out in the open. So to capture that objective, you got to put yourself out there.
Yeah, there could still be objectives like behind obscuring ruins.
Yes.
It can be behind, behind like dense terrain or dense cover item. But you're right. There's going to be most likely no more objectives in, magic boxes that, your dreadnoughts are just kind of have Ed 209 syndrome from RoboCop where like they go downstairs. Yeah. They'll just like fall over and end up on their back. But yeah, it's very interesting. They also said that fortifications can't hold objectives anymore. So wah wah.
Yeah, it's too bad. Sorry, a plasma obliterator that was sitting on an objective.
Hey, I did that. That's me. I used to do that. That's fun.
You do what the rules allow you to do.
Yeah. These match play missions, they kept some of the rules that we know and love. The rule of 3 is in there in the match play missions. You can't have more than one of the same data sheet, so no more than 3 3 repulsor executioners. I think they still have the caveat in there about troops. I'm sure they do. Troops and dedicated transports are immune, but they also kind of there used to be a workaround with demon princes to where you could have more than
you could have 3 Nurgle, 3 whatever Zines, 3
Yeah, not anymore. They fixed that. So the match play rules that we've come to know and love are still there with a little bit more, should we say, buffing up.
Yeah, for sure. After that, you select your secondary objectives. We'll talk about that. But essentially, you write, everyone takes 3 of them in a Strike Force mission. You write them down, and then you secretly reveal them, which is what, most of us are used to doing that. Then you roll for attacker/defender. The winner decides whether to be the attacker or the defender. Here's an interesting thing. I think there's a new mission in the chapter proof book that does benefit the attacker, but there's 1 out of 9 missions. The defender gets to select the deployment zone and drop the first unit. So the attacker actually gets to pick the other deployment zone, the opposite deployment zone, and then drops a second unit. There's really no benefit to being the attacker in this case, because as we're going to find out in a second, you're still rolling for first turn. It's still a random roll. Nothing changes your roll. There's no +1. There's no, I deploy all my stuff. You deploy all your stuff. There's no missions that have that. Every mission has this exact same format. So you roll, and the winner probably will say, I'm going to be the defender. I'm going to pick this zone. And drop my first unit, and then after everyone, after they've done the alternating deployment, then you roll off again for first turn. And I think that's I'm not sure how I feel about that. The 2 random roll. I'm glad Seize the Initiative is gone, but it's weird because it's like you're always going to be deploying, knowing that there's half the time you're not going to go first.
Yeah, I mean it seems like kind of a backwards. They've kind of went backwards on this one.
I think
a little bit to where it's. At least it's not like one roll to rule them all like it used to be, where if you won the roll, you decided what the deployment zone was.
Yep.
What your deployment zone was, and then who went.
Yep.
I think the one roll to rule them all was killer back. I think it was at the start of 8th that we had that, but it's a weird sequencing, and I was hoping the GT missions would fix that sequencing, and from what I'm seeing, they did not.
No, I don't. So essentially, when you deploy, you have to deploy this if you're going second, which, I mean, most people do anyways. But now there's absolutely zero. In fact, you could even make the argument that it's better to have more units on the table because you have more chances to put down units that don't, that they're not as important as others, because there's an alternating deployment. So if you finish first, it doesn't matter. You don't get a bonus to finish. You're not winning anything by finishing first.
No, and it penalizes elite armies, but I guess in this edition, elite armies aren't as nearly as penalized as just because of mechanics of the game. But You're right. There is no benefit to having fewer drops, because that was always the game within the game of 8th with deployment, was having less drops in your opponent.
You want that +1. What this is the next part I really, really enjoy, though, is you declare your reserves and your strategic reinforcements. And so you can't have more than half the total number of units or point value in strategic reserve. And you still have to arrive by the third battle round or be destroyed, but you actually declare everything that's going to be in strategic reserve before you start deploying your units. And so there's no more, I've got 6 units in reserve, go, drop 6 things. They're off the table. So it's like, okay, I have two units of intercessors and the impulsors. Then, and by the way, I'm going to bring in these eradicators. I'm going to spend a CP to do the eradicators in strategic reserves.
Yeah, it's definitely different. Yeah. It's definitely a different way of doing it. It's a different game.
So then you deploy. You're starting with the defender, and if a unit can't fit, it actually can't do anything the first turn. So if a unit doesn't fit in your deployment zone, it actually can't shoot, it can't fight, it can't move, it can't do anything. So this is, I don't know that there's many units that won't fit in a deployment zone, but this is sort of just future-proofing that. I think even that huge bomber probably fits, the Marauder bomber, but...
I was going to say, if there is a unit that doesn't fit, I'm sure it's Imperial Guard.
Yeah, it's some guard thing, yeah. And then, like we said, you roll off for first turn, and then you sort of resolve any kind of pregame abilities, and then you start. The battle ends after 5 rounds, and there are a max of 100 victory points.
Really, really quick, we alluded to it earlier that there is a step missing in there that we've had for the past few editions, and that is seize the initiative. There is no more seize the initiative.
Yeah,
so that's pretty big, because seize the initiative used to be like a huge part of the game where like models had rules that augmented your seize the initiative roll. Kodiaz or something that gave you a reroll on C's or something like that. It was a big part of the game, and it wasn't super often, but that 16.6%, of the time. Ugh.
Yeah, I've lost games on a C's so enough that I just don't. I don't miss it, not one bit.
I don't think many of us miss it. I mean, it benefited us Eldar players quite a bit, because if we got seized on or seized the initiative, we could just kind of reposition our stuff as a because of Phantasm. But yeah, it's sad to see it go, but in the long run, not really.
Yeah, in those Phantasm, those redeployment things are actually more important now, because it's random now. It's random for which zone you get, but it's also like random who goes first, and so you're alternating deployment. If you find that you've been out deployed, those strats actually mean something. I think they meant something before, but they're even more important now. So I think there's a max of 100 victory points, and I love the fact that I know this caused some consternation on the interwebs, but you got 10 points for.
Are you talking about the thing where GW is forcing us to paint our
they want you to paint. They want you to paint. You get 10 points for having your models painted quote unquote battle ready, and they've defined battle ready up and down. They have in their Citadel paint guide, here's how to paint a model to battle ready standard. Here's what battle ready is. So I don't know.
People were so mad about this. I don't understand why they're so mad about this. I mean, being battle ready is not hard. I mean, they have colored primers that you literally just wash and dry brush, and you are battle ready.
Well, and even then, like if you're playing with a friend, you probably this doesn't matter. If you're playing at a big event or even a good-sized event, usually they have paint standards anyways. So you kind of have to abide by those paint standards. The only thing this really impacts is like the little local like RTDs, like RTTs, the one-day events. And I'm considering, we run those every once in a while, and we get about, I don't know, maybe like 20 people, 10 people show up. Would I enforce the standard? Sure, you can bring gray plastic, but that's minus 10 points, because normally we don't enforce a painting standard for small events like that. But, hey, this is kind of built in now.
It's just a different way to incentivize painting your models.
Yep, so. For sure. So there's 45 primary and 45 secondary. Makes you wonder why they actually even call them primary or secondary. They're worth the same amount of points. The secondary, because you're picking 3 of them for Strike Force, you're getting 15 points each.
I think they differentiate between primary and secondary because when you read through these secondaries, they are not easy to do. Primary, you can max out primary pretty easily. It's not too hard. But these secondaries, man, like maxing out some of these secondaries is near impossible.
Yeah, for sure. And then the conceding part is if both agree, you calculate the victory points. If one wants to end early, they get 0, and the other player can play out the rest of the turns. I don't know how that works, but I think they're basically saying is that you can't concede, and then the player gets like very few points. They basically work out. Okay, and it's what was done already, anyways. It's just now it's stated in the book. So
well, I mean, before like they'd work it out. Hey, I could see. Let's see how many points. I could get this point type thing, but that's gone now. If you concede and want to end early, you get nothing.
Yep.
So, yeah, I guess it disincentivizes that sort of play. But
just conceding, I don't know. Sometimes you just have a bad game, and you just want to get out of there. So at that point, just take the 0 and move on, and just get a better opponent next time, or hopefully you're in a better mood next time, or decide to quit and just go have a beer. I don't know, something. I mean, there's no shame in that.
Nope.
So the secondary objectives, there are 5 categories of secondary objectives, and you cannot select more than one from each category. And in the book itself, you run out of these secondaries really quick because there's not very many of them. In the new chapter proof book that's coming out, there's more, but basically the categories you have are Purge the Enemy, which is I'm destroying these specific types of units. So there's a bunch of secondaries to choose from, but I'm going to destroy this kind of unit or that kind of unit. There's No Mercy, no Respite, which is just generically destroying units. Yeah,
real quick. On our theme of sorry hordes, you don't get to play in 9th edition the Thin Their Ranks secondary. Oh, brother. You basically tally up kill points. You get a point for killing a single model. And at the end of the game, you take how many models you've killed and divide that by 10, and that's how many victory points you get for that.
Yeah.
So that's an easy one against horde armies. Oh man.
Yeah, and you get more for if it had a you get 10 to the tally if the model had a wounds characteristic of 10 or more. So actually those bigger models you actually get 10 points for. So then if you've got somebody with a lot of units, you can that one is a good one to take for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's just more nail in the coffin, along with blast weapons and coherency, and
then there's a Battlefield Supremacy, which is kind of like line breaker, recon, controlling more than objective markers. Basically, these are standing somewhere, right? These are the objectives that you need to stand somewhere. They're board control secondaries. The nice thing about Battlefield Supremacy, what I really like them, is all of these are at the end of your turn, so you can get there. You don't have to hold it for a turn. You just get there and you can score these points. And so this is really incentivizing you to move out of your deployment zone and do things, because that's what you're going to be trying to do. That's what these particular secondaries are.
Yeah, and our friend Domination made the cut again. We just love Domination, right? And from the Maelstrom card, basically control every objective. It's not that bad of control every objective, but it's control more than half of the total number of objective markers on the battlefield.
And you get 3 points for that. That's like double dipping down in the primary. I mean, that's if like you really, really are pretty convinced that you can dominate the board from the get-go and keep it. So, and remember, this is 3 victory points. There's a max of 15 for each secondary. So in order to max out domination, you got to do this for all 5 turns. Yeah. And that's a theme here with these secondaries. And one of the first things is, you're used to reading mission packs where you could theoretically max out the secondaries. Some of these are written in such a way that you just can't. Like it's impossible to actually max them all out. So you have to be very careful about which ones you choose. And some of them, you're just not going to get 15 points, but you're taking them because, I can get 10. I know I can get at least 10. So these are much harder. Shadow operations take advantage of the new action mechanics. So these are all action-focused objectives. So remember, when you do an action, essentially you start your action at the end of your movement, and you're doing the action throughout the entire turn all the way to the start of your next command phase. So you have, repair, teleport Homer, and investigate sites, and raise the banners high. These are all things where you have to get an infantry unit, and it specifically says an infantry unit. Again, infantry units are really powerful in this game, this new edition. The infantry units have to do some kind of an action around an objective, and that's essentially what the shadow operations are.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then finally, there's a really weird one, the Warpcraft, which are focused basically on some around psychers, either having psychers, conducting rituals, or killing psychers. So these are going to be much more very situational, depending on your army or your opponent's army.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it tends to, obviously favors very specific armies, but there's one in here that is for non-psychic armies, Abhor the Witch, where you get victory points at the end of the battle for each enemy psyker character that is destroyed. So, I mean, there's ways of getting that, even without psychic army.
And I think that the nice thing about having a set of secondaries like this is that when we go to talk about different armies, some armies and some units do score some of these easier than others. And, there's just, if I look at an army, like whatever, like an AdMech, for example, like I look at my AdMech army and I'm like, okay, I'm going to run match play missions, and, we're going to pick up the chapter approved book, and I'm going to go through all of them and like, which ones can I build an army to achieve? Because it's really what you're going to be doing if you're kind of a dedicated match play player. Really, which one of these secondaries are the things that I can basically pick up? What units do I need to take, to be able to score these things, regardless of who my opponent is? So, so then like the Strike Force missions, there are 6 of them. The chapter approved is going to have, I think, 9. They're fixed deployment maps. So there's 6 missions. There are fixed deployment, meaning there's 2 Dawn of War, 2 Hammer and Anvil, 1 Vanguard, and 1 Search and Destroy. There are fixed objective placements. That one's different. You're not placing objectives anymore. The art of placing objectives was actually kind of a thing that a lot of people kind of had to learn, and now they're sort of fixed on the map. You don't roll for the map anymore either, like the old ITC. The mission is the map. So, I don't know, what do you think of that? I mean, that's kind of is a bit of a throwback. We didn't really used to have to roll for maps until 8th anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it takes some of the variability out of the game for sure, because a lot of these missions now can be practiced to a T with armies of, on what turns they move to what objectives with what units type thing. And it was always nice to have a little bit of random placement of objectives and a random placement of, which deployment zones it was. And I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of set deployment zones. It becomes too predictable.
Yeah, I like the rolling for it, but they really have taken away as much randomness in these missions as absolutely possible. Like there's literally 2 dice rolls. That's it. And everything else is just there. And the fixed objectives, like 2 of the missions have 4, 2 of them have 5, and 2 of them have 6. So they're always going to have at least 4 and at most 6. And there's always going to be at least 1 or 2 in your zone, and the rest of them are going to be out in no man's land. And that's essentially the maps. Even though the deployment maps change, most of the objectives, at least half or more, are always going to be outside of your zone. So you've got to go get them. And your opponent's got to do the same.
Good. There's going to be way less ability to, no ability to put your objectives as close to your little castle or gun line as possible.
Yeah, pretty much. The primary objective is the same. Basically, at the end of your command phase, you score 5 points for each of the following, and you max at 15. So if you control 1 objective, you get 5 points. If you control 2 or more, one of them I think has maybe 3 or more. But if you control 2 or more, you get 10 points. And if you control more than your opponent, you get 15. So in order to get 15, so remember, primary is a max of 45. So you've got to do this 3 times to max out your primary. There's 5 turns in the game. You don't actually score these until your command phase. So you don't actually start scoring these until turn 2 or round 2. So to max this, 3 of the 4 turns you have to control more objectives than your opponent.
Yeah, so. it's doable to max this out. It's a little bit difficult, but you can definitely max this out.
Mm-hmm.
In contrast with the secondaries, where it's near impossible to max that out.
Yeah, and to max this out, you've got to be going toward one of those middle objectives in the table. It's weird because I've played a couple. We've played some missions. When we've played these missions, you can do one of two things. You can have a chunk sitting on your zone, and you grab one to one side while your opponent grabs the other one, and you're just kind of like rotating your forces around. Or you can make the play where you split your forces to try to go for both of them. And it really just kind of depends on what your opponent has and how much you want to commit. And do you want to go all out, like turn one? Because at basically the start of round one, at the start of round two, or turn two, you are, okay, I'm scoring this thing. So round one, you're getting into position, but then round two rolls around, your units have to be where they're at. And the first player has the chance to jump out and grab these things. The second player has to react and shoot them off of at least one of those objectives, or they're just going to get behind like right away. So each one of these each one of the missions has a unique secondary objective, and you can choose this instead of the ones listed. And missions 3, 4, 5, and 6 each have unique rules, and so there's a few examples of these different rules here. Some of these missions have sort of a little bit of a twist. So like mission 3, for example, the mission rule, it's called the 4 pillars. The pillars in this mission, reinforcement units cannot be set up within range of any of the objective markers. Now, that is a unique rule to this particular mission. So it has its own secondary, and the secondary objective is called Siphon Power. Every one of these missions has a unique secondary. So in addition to the secondaries you have, at the very beginning, each mission has a unique one, but from 3, 4, 5, and 6, they'll have these interesting rules that kind of give it a unique twist. And I think the reason it works is because they have fixed deployment maps, because they have fixed objective maps. They can dial these in and make them as balanced, quote unquote, as they can try to make them.
It's interesting, and I know we'll probably get into it later if we think this is viable for tournament play. But these unique secondaries and unique mission rules for each one, it's definitely makes these missions a little bit imbalanced.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So that's basically what we have for the match play missions. Before we jump into that topic, though, let's take a break and let's hear a word from our sponsor, DGT.
We all love Warhammer 40K, but sometimes games just take too long. Using a game timer is the best way to make sure games finish and for both players to get an equal amount of time. Check out the Easy Game Timer from DGT, manufacturers and designers of the timers officially sanctioned by the International Chess Federation. It's simple to set up and customize, and your settings are saved when it's turned off. It's easy to use with a large moving lever for changing turns and a clear digital readout. It's the most affordable and high-quality game timer on the market and is the choice of most 40K events. Whether you want to practice before a big event or you just want to be a better player, the Easy Game Timer from DGT is the perfect game timer for your 40K events. The DGT Easy Game Timer is available from many online retailers. Wholesale pricing is also available for tournament organizers. Check these fine clocks out at dgtnorthamerica.com. Speed up your game and improve your play with the Easy Game Timer from DGT.
All right, so we were chatting about these missions, and are these good to run out of the book, and are they imbalanced? It's hard to say.
Yeah, well, let's look at the context clues of this. So they're taking match play missions, and they're kind of throwing a bit of randomness into them to make them, unique and, to throw us a curveball. If they're doing this for the missions, I wonder what they're going to do in the codexes.
Yeah.
Are they going to have flavorful, cool secondaries for each army? If this framework in the book continues, I would say maybe. And if that is the case, these missions will be wildly imbalanced.
Yeah. Because secondaries are everything. The primary is one thing. You can sell out and win the primary, but you've got to pick up some secondaries. And I think some players are already thinking, okay, I need to be able to max my secondaries. That's my key to victory. And just think of how long it takes to get a good secondary written for ITC, and how and how wonky some of them got, where they had to write these ridiculously long things. The secondaries for Nova and ITC were kind of written in such a way as that any army could, quote unquote, conceivably score it. Like, it was good against a lot of things, or not any army, but they were really universal secondary objectives. These feel very army specific, and if we start getting book specific secondaries, oof, boy, it could get interesting. And we haven't seen the chapter approved. We've seen some of the leaks. I mean, the format's the same. I haven't gone through the secondaries with a fine-tooth comb yet, but I don't know if they're going to be that much different. I think the secondaries are really a wild card right here. And I mean, I love the mechanic of it, but boy, if they're not careful, they could get really bad.
I mean, all we have to do is look at the Maelstrom cards that GW released in 7th and 8th. Some of them were very odd. I mean, like, for example, there was crazy Maelstrom cards where you got a victory point if you killed a unit that was previously holding an objective. It's doable. Mm-hmm. It's doable. Could it be a little tough? Absolutely, but it's doable. Mm-hmm. But then you'd have like an Iron Hands one that was like you got 2 victory points for it, and it was literally like kill an enemy unit.
Yeah.
You guys just ran out of steam.
Yeah. I think it.
One of these things is not like the other, and it just creates a lot of opportunity for imbalance between the armies. Yeah,
we'll see. At some point, you run out of rules. Mm-hmm. You run out of unique, interesting, flavorful things. It's tough though, because the thing about ITC missions, for example, you get tired of them after a while. You get sick of playing them. Just because they're just familiar. Mm-hmm. This, I think, could get stale really quickly. I hope that they don't try to jazz it up with some stuff that makes it wildly unbalanced.
Yeah, and at least there'll be 9 of them instead of 6.
Yeah, for sure.
Hopefully that'll help spice them up a little bit.
I also think, though, too, there's a very what I like about these is there is not a kill one, kill more kind of thing, because I hated that. I like the fact that these are focused on capturing points on a board, and those points on a board can't be in a terrain feature. Like you said, you can have terrain between it. You can have dense cover, for example, that is between you and the objective, or you can have obscuring terrain that's kind of cutting things off. And I think that's necessary. I think you need that now in this game. But it's very much a go out and get objectives game. Which is it's not what it used to be. You used to be able to, as an elder player, I could take a turn or two and just shoot my way out of it, shoot my way out of my deployment zone and then jump on things. Yeah. You can't really do that now. You have 4 turns.
Yeah, and there's a couple of knight players right now that have some pretty big frowny faces on, because if that's the way the mission setup is going to go, then low model count armies, when I model count armies, like we're talking like armies with like 4 or 5 models, they're going to suffer a lot.
Well, I mean, and just look at the secondaries that are all action based. Those all require infantry units to do those with. So if you don't have infantry in your army, and most people will, except knights, for example, they're going to have to ally in, or those objectives they're not even in play. So already they're dropping 3 objectives from what they could possibly take. All right. Well, I guess time will tell, and we'll keep playing them, and then we will look forward to what Chapter Proof gives us today, because by the time this drops, it will be Saturday, and 9th edition will be out. And the thing about it is, we don't have events coming up, so this is going to be Garage Hammer for a while. And I'm kind of, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to Garage. There's a little bit of Garage Hammer time.
Yeah, it'll be a great time to learn the in those, low pressure, environments of just a garage with, standing 6 feet apart.
Yep. 6 feet apart with a mask. The other thing too is, it's low pressure paint. Sometimes Garage Hammer motivates, or events motivate you to paint. Garage Hammer doesn't really do that. So, you don't have this pressure to paint, but you can paint the things you want to paint and play the way you want to play. So, I think we're going to have some time to do that, and we'll have another episode later once we kind of get to grips with the chapter approved missions, and a little more thought on exactly how those things play, and how different armies, how they're beneficial for some and maybe not for others. So
yeah, I foresee other mission packs coming out from tournament circuits. Probably not necessarily, ATC or not necessarily Nova per se, but we might see I don't know, an Adepticon mission packet come out, because I think there's a lot of work that can be done on these missions.
I think I'm a little more optimistic than you are, but yeah, I get it. There's room here for they could be a little better. I don't like the roll and roll. I'm not a fan of that, but there's just been so difficult to set up, like who goes first. It's always been a question in this game.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, that is all we have, and like I said, we'll talk more about these as we get more familiar with them, and we've had a little more games under our belt, and we can talk about like what we think about these missions. Probably sometime when it's much colder outside. Right now, it's July and it's quite warm, so after we've played these for a while, we'll give you some more thoughts on that. But thank you so much for listening to our show. We love to hear from our listeners, so feel free to message us on Facebook or email us at thebattlehosts@gmail.com. If you'd like to support us, you can help us in a few different ways. You can tell your friends about us. You can like us on Facebook. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can leave a review on iTunes, which helps to boost our listening audience. Finally, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thebattlehost. For as little as $1 a month, you can help us with the cost of running the show and staying engaged with the 40K community. So thanks for listening to Battle Hosts.
Remember to be a better gamer
and build a better community. Good night.